Okay, let's try again on this. Without any interference signals being run by this mirror that I'm communicating to all of you through. But this has to do with not just a pole tilt. So I'm going to try and keep this simple so that those that watch this can follow right along, right? And has a lot more to do with how the morphogenetic field structure works of communication, or if you will, the EFFI field, right? All things become known, knowing one from the other, or knowing the torque speed differential between one and the other, which is knowing the difference between the speed, between something that's using electrons, right, that becomes a waste product of running a biocomputer, okay, and being the actual accelerator, which means you're the source from which all biocomputers are running voltage. That's what I am, okay? So you realize I'm equal unto all of you that I'm giving electrons to, or if you will, light, eternal light, which is eternal unconditional love. So you're experiencing eternal love vibration. The consciousness itself that is alive and living in consciousness, right? Okay. And living spirit is the most powerful spirit, is fire, right? Burning the house down, right? Anybody that's ever seen a forest fire, like burning in Southern California or anywhere up in Washington or through Oregon or Idaho or Montana, particularly when you've seen what are known as firestorms. They have big ones up in Alaska and parts of Canada. What we call torching, like, what is it, the Statue of Liberty holding the torch, right? Torching. And it's a term that firefighters use called torching. Because I've been around a lot of torching, completely surrounded by fire, as a matter of fact, by trees that are 150 feet, 170 feet high, they're all up, they're all burning. And then experiencing what are known as tornadoes. We know what a vortex is, right? So you're experiencing fire spinning all around you, generating an enormous amount of electromagnetic radiation, right? That's a lot of heat. That's a lot of fire, right? Okay, so you know the power of the spirit of fire. So you know what a firewall is with a biocomputer. So when you're running God's eternal spirit of fire, that's a firewall. So you have access to what God knows, because God is letting you know as the ultimate informer of the future, right? Future proves past, back to the future. So when you're experiencing eternal love, that's what you're always experiencing, because you have a one connection. You have a connection to the founders, to experience what the founders experience, upon which the first universal galactic temple was created, out of what love is. So it is that fire that burns off what? Code. Because you know how a computer works. It's a program, right? So you're running instruction sets that are paired between the chromosomes, or if you will, between the two magnets on the planet, the two poles. And then you have, if you will, the phantom time, right? Black hole technology that is like tapped into a spigot. Remember, I gave you the example of tapping into somebody else's phone line, or tapping into somebody else's voltage line. Hey, somebody's running 50,000 volts over here. Whoa, who put that in? I don't know, but it's there. We can tap into that. Oh, you want to tap into that pipe? That pipeline? That beam? Tap into that sun. Right? Hey, we can use the energy off that sun. Right? To power our systems. Right? Systems design, system design engineering, genetic engineering, gene code, codecs. So you have codec engineering, like Kodak cameras, the camera eye, right? And so the way that I sort of do this is that you have the morphogenetic field structure. So I rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, when I've experienced the use of somebody else's energy to focus on learning what they're learning by virtue of what they're learning through experience in the application of their energy, which is their consciousness, from which they're going to learn in the future, what they're using their energy for to learn in the future. And then they share what they've learned with us, right? So it's just like, I didn't use all of my energy for 30 to 40 years to study the morphogenetic field structure, but I know somebody who did. And that would be Rupert Sheldrake, right? So if you want to learn about how DNA communicates with other DNA, or from software system to software system, okay, of how consciousness that is running software is communicating with each other within a grid network, which is a network, a hub server, Rupert Sheldrake. Go to Rupert Sheldrake. He spent his whole life studying this. Rupert Sheldrake was great. He was the one, for example, I experienced, what I experienced through him a number of years ago, how, for example, a game, a binary game, right? Not trinary, binary, the Bescopiscus. Now, Gaia's logos is three spheres. Now you jump up to 12, and how the prime numbers in the complex number space works using calculus between what you're going to load in memory and what you don't want to load in memory, or put it in memory plus. Like when I was a kid, I'm going to put this in temporary memory. So I gave a command function to my supercomputer. Listen, when we're done doing what we're doing here on behalf of a salvage mission, we're going to delete all the rest of this. Because you realize it doesn't represent what I am, which is what love is. It goes on forever. What? Accelerating at the highest rate of speed, electrons. So nobody's running out of any voltage. There isn't a loss of one electron. So now you're talking about the torque speed differential between one and the other, which is a deadlight magnet, right? A deadlight magnet system, okay? And a system design in which everybody's experiencing high voltage. Whoa, nobody's feeding anybody energy. So you got a DC connection. Wow, so the template that you're running, which is the star map, which is a universal and a galactic star network map, you're experiencing direct current. Wow, we're experiencing the founders. Yeah, of course. And the founders are equal unto all that we give love to, because that's the energy that we use to create the template with. So you're running a temple, a sacred temple. So that's a sacred temple of light, which is a sacred temple of eternal love. So now you're experiencing the EFFI field. So now that you got a one connection to experience eternal unconditional love, you already know that God loves you forever and always, just like I've always said, I love you forever and always. Then you realize that that energy is running hot, right? So when you're running hot, right, you're burning a lot of stuff off that doesn't represent what love is. And those are codes. It's just like the jab stuff, okay? When I experience things, because I'm supposed to experience it at the time I'm supposed to experience it. So believe it or not, I was experiencing an advertisement in a journal over in the UK where they were advertising looking for a software engineer, okay? Because they already knew what was going to be generated as codes, which represent viral codes in the future. So they were already advertising, because they knew this, looking for a software engineer that can come up with a software fix. So when you understand mRNA, or what RNA transcription is, when you realize that you're a radio receiver and you're a computer running calculus between what you're going to load in memory and what you're going to delete in memory or get rid of. So now you have the difference between the two, negative and positive, right? Which is polarized consciousness, which is the charge capacity, which is the electrolytes, which is the metabolism, which is the speed at which we're experiencing what we are in energy. So the faster the drive motor that you have, the faster you're getting rid of what you just experienced to experience something new that love experiences. That's energy creation spheres that is experiencing what love is, because that's the energy that we use to create a template with. Right? Okay, so the way the morphogenetic field structure works is that when I share something with you within a network, your computer's connected to other computers that you're networked with, then that means that you're going to be running the information that is represented by the mathematical and the geometrical formation of what I experienced being a polarity integrator that's now being shared and experienced by somebody else. That's called a circulation library. So now it's running through that biovoltage. Now it's connected to other biovoltage. So how fast can I experience in the future what I communicated with somebody else in the past what we all experience in the future, which is what love is. So Rupert gave a great example of sort of how that works when they set up a game that hadn't been experienced before. It was a brand new game. So in other words, it wasn't in the APIN grid yet because it wasn't being held in memory and having already been run. Otherwise, you're experiencing something in the future that already happened. So let's experience something new that hasn't happened before. So we're going to invent something new. So they invented a new game so they could test to see what the effect was going to be or the result was going to be, that they can thus realize, hey, we know how it works. Future proofs past, Back to the Future. When you have nodes or computer terminals that are all connected to each other on a Gaia motherboard. Okay? So what he was able to show is that children that was like a control group were playing this game, and they had mastered the skill sets based on the standards for which the game was designed, which means they mastered it. Okay? And so what they realized is they took the same game to some children in China. And the children in China started out, when they first played that game, where the children in Los Angeles had left off, which means the skill, the mastery of the skill, which is based on the math and the geometrical sound and light patterns of how to master that game, thus was already known in the morphogenetic field, which is the EFFI field, that game is being played, is now becomes a known, which means that the children in China don't have to use time and energy to experience learning how to play that game that was mastered by the people in Los Angeles. It means that the people in China already have the information in which they can run through their computer what somebody else had already experienced that they learned from, that they're now starting off at. That's called accelerated learning in the way that the morphogenetic field structure works between one and another computer. Right? So if I've learned something by the speed at which I'm learning, which is accelerated learning, then the accelerated learning based on the DNA operating system, which is the biocomputer that's operating within an environment, is learning so fast that the speed at which that unit of energy, which is soul arcing consciousness, is experiencing what it's experiencing by what it's learning, is now sharing what it's learning through others by being connected to the motherboard. That means that other learners, other units of consciousness, are now learning at the rate of speed at which the other learners are learning at a rate of speed, and you begin to see how the higher evolution of consciousness is taking place in order to restore what's been lost. Which basically means we're all healing each other that way by learning how to do that, how to self-heal. So now we're all healing each other. So the reason that this is important is because of what I've had to do my whole life that I've mentioned in a number of videos, because I have been exposed when we talk about the jab and all that kind of stuff and the proteins and all the rest of it. Transcription means you're writing that code into your computer. And thus you're going to experience it in the future by virtue of having loaded it into the past. In other words, those codes get written as read-active memory, just like loaded into memory. Now you're going to experience in the future what the codes are represented were intended to do by the unit of consciousness that developed the software to do it. You're in a planetary software motherboard. Okay, so they know how to load programs that you thus experience, right, as a result of loading that program, and now you're going to run it. That's a virus. Okay, so you can see that you can experience the symptoms, for example, what it's like to experience the codes, the software. Okay, so that's called a code transfer, right? So, or what they call shedding, okay, or gene swarming. Right? Because your antenna is picking that stuff up. Okay? That's what an antenna does. That's what DNA does. We're an antenna. We're picking up the signals. So the signals that represent the codes, which represent the waves, right, which represent the frequencies that you're now experiencing in us as a result of what they released into the environment. Right? So now we find ourselves in a contamination zone because the units of consciousness that are producing what they're generating, which are those codes, is being written into the computer so that computer is running those codes, thus they experience those codes, which are based on the frequencies. So this is where you get into the light by how much light you're running, how much light are you running on, which is the capacity to run an enormous amount of fire, right? So the more fire that you're experiencing, which is the eternal spirit of fire, which is the eternal spirit of God's love, which is an eternal love vibration, has the ability to expose the codes so it knows what the codes are. So what